And you've just heard Plans by Savage Mansion from their new album, Golden Mountain, Here I Come. And I'm delighted to be joined by Savage Mansion's Craig Angus. Hello, Craig.
Good morning.
So what can you tell us about Golden Mountain, Here I Come? Because there's a lot going on from my side of things, I think.
What do you mean?
Well, it just means I think there's musically. No, here I'm asking the questions. You, that's not the fair. But okay, from my point of view, this feels like a real classic album. You know, 10 tracks. It feels like you've thought about where they go. You've thought there's all sorts of different instruments going on. It's a kind of indie album, but it's quite a big production as well. That's what I think about it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's on the lines we were thinking about. You know, we wanted to make something really melodic with range, but also with coherence throughout the record. And we wanted it just to be focused a bit more than the previous stuff had been. I think the first couple of records the first album was like just a collection of kind of everything we'd done up to that point, recorded really quickly over one weekend. So it obviously has that kind of ramshackle feel. The second record was written way too quickly. I wrote it in like 2 months. I still like it. People seem to like it, but I have some regrets about it, maybe. So this was like an opportunity to really just do something with no regrets, really, I suppose, in that regard, to like take time to think about the arrangements, the lyrics, to do something that was like different for us, but also a kind of natural progression for us as well. And I think we've kind of hit on to like what the band is now, which is something we hadn't really done until now.
Now that's interesting. I would say that although every track stands on its own right, you don't get the full picture unless you hear the album as a full. It's a proper album in that sense.
Definitely. I mean, we were quite brutal cutting stuff off of it as well. You know, we left a few. Remember playing the album back to a couple of friends and then being like, "Oh shit, that's the one, that's the best one." And I was like, "Here, we're thinking about leaving that off." And they were like, "No way." And I was like, "No, we are," because it just didn't really fit with the kind of 10 tracks that we had in mind. Just whenever we put it in, this is a song we left off. Sorry, I should have said that. We might put it out as a B-side at some point, but it just didn't really work. So we were quite brutal about that. The songs that we recorded and the song that we put on had to be good songs, and they had to fit. And if they didn't, then they were discarded, you know. So
did you have quite a lot of material there? Not just like a 1 or 2 songs, was there?
Not, maybe like 5 more. A couple of things actually ended up on as a single before the album came out. There was the Wigwise Prizes single, and they were just so different. They were way more like the last album. They could have been on the last album. I think I would really like to have had those songs in the mix last time around. But yeah, there was a few other ones as well.
Right.
And it's a great position to be in, you know. I think you want to be able to edit a bit.
Yeah.
Although it does mean you have to do things like that. You have to leave off tracks that are good and that people might enjoy.
So was it always going to be 10 tracks? Did you have this idea that you've got almost in old school vinyl terms, 5 tracks a side, that sort of thing?
That's exactly right. I think the last couple were a bit longer. We just wanted to make it like tight, 9 or 10, especially with the last track being so long. We thought it could have been 9, but 10 was a good compromise in the end. Yeah, I think it's a good length to it. I'm pretty happy with like how it flows, to be honest. Like I've listened back to it a couple of times, and yeah, I think we've made some good decisions in the track listing and also like leaving things off.
And you mentioned that there was the opportunity to take your time with this album. Was that circumstantial due to the COVID and lockdown and all that kind of thing, or do you think you would always have taken the time with this one? Maybe lessons learned from previous ones.
I never take time over things. It was a big thing for me to learn in general, like over that year. And I'm kind of slipping back into that habit again now, where I'm like really wanting to do things all the time. And it's good. It does mean you get things done, but there's a lot to be said for kind of slowing the pace of things and thinking about what you're doing a bit more, and also giving like ideas time to ferment. Because something that seems like a great idea can not seem like a great idea a few months down the line. But if you've already committed to doing it, it's not ideal. But yeah, it was circumstantial. It was just because we were all in the same position, more or less, out of work, in our gaff or our respective homes, and there wasn't much else to do. And it kind of quickly built up a lot of material. Some stuff we've been working on before as well. And then by the time we started rehearsing, we were just like, again, we had nothing else on. None of us were like inhibited by work commitments or anything like that. We just had time to go in and do it. And we were all really enjoying the process as well. So it was particularly easy to kind of find the time to do it. And that, yeah, I'd like to think I learned something from that. But as I say, I've been slipping back into just wanting to do things all the time again recently. Maybe I should be thinking about that a bit more, because it was a really good way of working, you know.
Yeah. And what was the kind of practicalities of a band making an album like this when there was certain constrictions on you and everything like that? Were you able to kind of meet up to do it at periods, or was it all done remotely?
Well, the initial kind of thing was that we did things remotely. There was a lot of sharing ideas going around, and then when things kind of eased up, I mean, my kind of go-to thing when I'm writing songs is to go and see Andrew, our guitarist, Andrew McPherson, and play him the songs on a guitar or on a keyboard and sort of jam them out with him and figure out maybe a few ways we could take it. So we did that. And then it was just like the sort of second half of the year where we got together and started playing them in the room together. I guess there was probably some, and I guess like some people probably wouldn't have been comfortable doing that. We had to have a conversation about it. We had to say, do you feel comfortable doing this?
Yeah.
And we all did. And I guess like the way we kind of saw it was like our job, you know, and some people were going into work and we just wanted to go, you know, it was good for us to do it. It was like good for us mentally to do it, I think, more than anything, you know, like there's nothing like being bored for like a long period of time, and it was something to look forward to and like to get invested in for a few weeks, 2 weeks. There were some difficulties, but no, we didn't really think about it too much after the kind of first lockdown. Once things opened up, we were quite happy to do it.
And you know, you said that the kind of slower nature of making this record, you think it's paid off, and I think it certainly has as well. But you feel now that, you know, you're starting to think, well, what can I do and work at a different pace? Why do you think that is? Is that just the way that you're particularly driven to do things, or do you think there's something about making music in the modern day that you almost, you know, there's not enough focus on what's just happened? It's almost like you have to think about what's next.
That's a good point. I think it's probably a bit of both. Like, I think I'm definitely guilty of doing things because I want the sense of accomplishment that comes from it more than like I'm enjoying it in the moment. I'm quite like bad for like, I don't know. I've got quite a strong work ethic, and sometimes the balance gets a little bit unhealthy, put it that way. But then the thing about the current music industry is probably very true, you know. And it does feel harder to get people's attention, perhaps. I mean, this release being a good example. I think it's going to have to be a slow burning thing for us, because I wasn't expecting fireworks. The fireworks haven't come, but we're about to go and do a bunch of gigs, and I think that'll be when people hear it, and that'll be great. But if you're not doing that and you're just releasing and just hoping that someone will hear it, you know, you see every week there's like 10, 12 amazing, like, I mean, the day our record came out, I'm pretty sure like there was 4 or 5 big hitters, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just the big hitters. There's probably another 20, 30 indie releases that are coming out. It's just so hard to keep on top of it, you know, for people who are passionate about keeping on top of it.
Yep, I agree.
I guess though, it's good not to think about it in those terms though, from a creative standpoint, because I don't know, like your audience is kind of out of your control for the most part. You can do some stuff to like try and get people's attention, and we've actually done that this time around, but it's not worth like assessing yourself against it, you know. Like you have to assess your art from an artistic standpoint.
Yeah. Well, you
and I think mainly the thing for me, like we're working on album 4 just now, like I'm just excited about it, and I'm like thinking about how we can take the next step, like some of the kind of musical developments that happen on this album, how we can like take that further. That's kind of the main motivation, really.
Yeah.
Because it is the sense of accomplishment that's the main thing. And like the sense of having done something that you're happy with.
So you kind of make it, you put it out there, and how it's received, you've got no real kind of control over it.
Just gotta let it go. You gotta let it go. You know, there's no other way to do it. But that takes time to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think I was quite like uptight about that in my 20s, particularly. You know, my first band, I would always like just really wanted to do things. I really wanted to go and play more gigs. I really wanted to play like festivals. I really wanted to travel. And it never ever happened. And I was always like, why is this not happening? And eventually, like, you just clock that you just have to work on yourself, you know. And it leads for better work.
Yeah.
And you know, anybody who looks at it, because it's a bad look as well, if you're like kind of coming across it bitter or something, it doesn't look good on anybody.
No, I think that's right. And it's interesting talking to you, and you're already thinking about the next record, because I think that happens it happens with everyone. You know, I speak to writers about their new book, and actually what they're thinking about really is the next one. You know, that they've done that one, it's out there and it's put to the side. And I think that's quite a common thing.
Well, like I think because of, especially with the traditional vinyl release, the time is just so huge now. Like we finished mixing this record at the start of March last year. So this is the start of March now.
Yeah.
And like we were working on it for 6 months before that, like in a kind of various longer, even if you consider the writing stage. So it's old for me, you know. I don't have any, the novelty is worn off for me personally, you know. I'm not like thinking about it all the time. And like there were a couple of songs that I was particularly excited about sharing, but like, yeah, for the most part, it's been thinking about the next thing. And we are doing that. We've booked that in, so that's going to happen. And that's good.
So, but does that kind of switch a little bit when you tour? You said you're going to take it out and play live. Do you then have to kind of reconnect with it?
Yeah, well, we had to have a rehearsal last week because we had this show in Cumbernauld, and it was yeah, you do have to, like, there's a couple of songs we hadn't played live. We've been playing like a few gigs over the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And we had to learn a few of them for that. But to be honest, and with that, it's actually more connecting with the material that came before that that's trickier. It's like, where does that fit now? And we're kind of finding that particularly the weird country stuff kind of sits really awkwardly in the set now. The first album and the third album are kind of more connected in terms of like, you know, that probably feels like a more natural successor to that, whereas the second one's this like outlier, this kind of alt country thing. Still good to have it, and we'll still try and play a couple of songs from it, but it is trickier to fit them into like a set.
Yeah. So how you are going to go out and play live? Do you have any dates kind of penciled in, or do you know where you're going, or is that still to be?
Well, we're going on tour with Pictus Trail for like 3 weeks, so that starts in, we're away 3 weeks today. Yeah, we're away 22nd of March, and it's 16 shows, so it's the biggest run of shows we've ever done in this band. And then we've got a few of our own headline shows after that in Scotland. We're playing Stereo in Glasgow on the 15th of April, Good Friday.
Excellent.
That'll be great. Sneaky Pete's on Easter Sunday, doing a fundraiser for Tiny Changes in Dunfermline on the 16th. We've got a few things lined up before the summer, yeah. And then I don't know what happens after that. That's still kind of up for discussion. But hopefully people hear the record and hopefully people want to come and see us play it live, because we'd like to do more.
I said at the beginning, I think it's like it feels to me like a classic album, and I'm interested in the influences you had for it. You know, I was thinking about comparing it to records that I love, like bands like the Wooden Tops or Go-Betweens or things like that. People who, as I say, had this indie sensibility, but started to make more expansive records, which I think is what you've made. So kind of what were your influences for this album?
I think one of the best things about this record was that we didn't really go in with any kind of like thing that we wanted to try and replicate.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the first album, I remember having like a few different songs, like varied enough. Kate LeBon stuff, Deerhoof stuff. Not things that really sounded like what Revision Ballads sounded like in the end, but in terms of like trying to get certain sounds and certain aesthetics, we had like a lot of reference points. And the same happened with the second album. We were like really playing up to Wilco and the Hold Steady and like totally different stuff, but we had like specific reference points in mind quite a lot of the time. And this time around, we didn't at any point really like bring that up. There was no conversation like that at any point. I remember listening back to it and saying to Ross, who engineered it, oh, this is actually kind of reminded me of this year's Model by Elvis Costello a little bit in terms of but that was something we thought about afterwards. So maybe it had been subconsciously there. And I'm a big fan of Elvis Costello and big fan of that record. But it wasn't like openly discussed. The one thing that was openly discussed, I think, was the B-52s.
Right.
And I think partly most of that came from Beth, who like loves that and was thinking about that with a lot of the backing vocals. What else did we think about? I guess like Andrew probably thought about a lot of stuff from guitar standpoint. There was the kind of a few television comparisons for his playing, which I think is appropriate. He loves television. No, but like, yeah, I honestly, we didn't have a specific thing in mind. I think we wanted it to be something that was expansive and like had a different. I tell you one thing that we did do deliberately was that the custom was very intentionally like a nod to what's happening just now,
right,
in terms of like post-punk, the post-punk revival. It was like, it's meant to sound like a kind of man shouting over a fast beat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a parody. But a loving parody.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still a parody. So that was discussed as well. I don't know if I should have said that or not. No, but there was nothing particular that we like wanted to do. We just wanted to make something that had a diverse range of influences and kind of reflected what we listened to.
Is that maybe a sign of what you said earlier about growing as a band, in that you don't have to kind of, you're kind of more confident in your own sound and who you are as a band, rather than saying, well, a little bit of that and a little bit of this. You think, no, we're Savage Mansion and this is what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And as a person as well, you know, like I kind of said that earlier, I was quite like a little bit insecure for a lot of my 20s probably. And I just like, we're all kind of getting older and we're all a lot more chilled out and we don't really care what anyone thinks. And it's amazing. It's like it's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely.
I turned 30 during that process, and I just feel like, I know it's just an arbitrary number, but it feels like quite liberating to have got to that point and just be like, right, cool. Like, I'm no longer concerned about what I'm achieving. I'm just happy to be existing, and for the most part anyway.
Yeah. There's a lesson there for all of us, I think, Craig.
I hope so, yeah.
Well, listen, thanks so much for taking time to have a chat. I think you've made, as I say, a classic, cracking record. I absolutely love it. Been playing it a lot. And yeah, cheers for taking the time to talk.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
And this is Savage Mansion and the Black Cat.